Good morning. Thank you all for coming to visit with us again today. Welcome to Bible Study with Andre and Betty. We're continuing our studies from the book of Daniel, and today we're in chapter 6. We'll be focusing on the events surrounding the den of lions. And in Daniel chapter 6, we're looking at the reign of the Second World Empire under Darius for the Medians and for Cyrus under the Persians, but they operate under one empire. And it's no longer imperial rule. Darius is going to have cabinet members or a legislature rather than ruling everything as Nebuchadnezzar and his descendants did. So chapter 6 verse 1 says, "It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes or leaders, which should be over the whole kingdom." Much like our legislature and our Senate plays the role of governing for all the people of each state. And verse 2 says, "And over these, over the 120 princes, 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first." And so over the 120 leaders, 3 presidents were set over them, and Daniel had the highest position. And the reason is in verse 2 that the princes might give accounts unto them, unto the 3 presidents, and the king should have no damage, no loss of revenue. Verse 3, "Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes." Why? Because he had an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm of the whole kingdom. So Daniel, because the Spirit of God lived in him, Darius saw the effects of this man who is filled with the wisdom of God, and he wanted to set him over everything, of course, under his leadership. But then something is going to happen that will let us know the meaning of Proverbs 14:30, which says something like, "A sound heart gives life, but envy is the rottenness of the bones." And when these 2 presidents and the 120 are going to get together, their envy is going to cause them to seek to discredit Daniel and his position. So verse 4 says, "Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion or to find fault against Daniel concerning the kingdom, because of his excellent spirit of Daniel's excellent spirit, and how Darius looked upon Daniel. These presidents and princes decided that they needed to discredit Daniel. But they could not find none occasion nor fault. Whatever they were looking for, they were unable to find. And we see this play out in the life of Jesus when the religious leaders sought to find fault against Jesus, and Pontius Pilate declared 3 times that no fault could be found in Jesus. So Daniel is in a position where they're seeking for him a way to discredit him. Now let me read verse 4 again. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault. For as much as he, that is Daniel, was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Verse 5, then said these men, we shall not find any accusation or occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. So jealousy is when it's a negative emotion that one feels when they think someone is getting something that they deserve. But envy goes much further and start to set up schemes and plots and conspiracies to discredit another person that they're envious of. So they said they could not find the fault against him concerning the job he was doing, but they felt they could find fault because the Jewish religion was higher morally and spiritually than the rest of the world. So they said they'd find fault against him concerning the law of his God. And then they set in motion, verse 6, then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. And verse 7, all the presidents, which is a lie because Daniel is a president and he's not included. But they say to the king, all the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save or except of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, I know it's often talked about concerning the book of Daniel and calling it the lion's den. But repeatedly, the scriptures say den of lions because this enclosure was constructed and they filled it with lions for the purpose of punishing people. And so it is a den of lions rather than the lion's den. Verse 8, now, O king, they're talking to the king, establish the law or the decree and sign the writing, sign the document, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. In the kingdom of Media Persian, once a law was made, that law could not be changed. But later, they're going to start making amendments. When the law does not suit their purpose, then they make amendments to that law in order to incorporate their ideas into the original law. And that is being done daily in the United States and all over the world. When a law does not accomplish one's purpose, then they come up with another law, which is called an amendment. Verse 9, Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. So they wrote it, and he read it, and he signed it, thinking that Daniel is amongst those that brought this idea to the king. Verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing of the decree was signed, he went into his house. Daniel went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber or in his room toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime, or as he always did. When something is coming against us, we do not need to alter our relationship and fellowship with the Lord to fit somebody else's time schedule. So Daniel, even though he knew what the decree said, because he served the Lord God, he was not going to change his daily way of doing things. Verse 11. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Verse 12. Then they came near, they came back to the king and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. They say to him, Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, The thing is true according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be changed, or which altereth not. Then answered they in verse 13 and said before the king, That Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regarded not thee, O king. He's not paying you any attention. He's not obeying your rule, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. So they set up this scheme, and now they're trying to hold Darius accountable to the law that he had written and signed. Verse 14. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore or greatly displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. So he recognized at this point what had taken place, and he was not displeased with what they did. He was displeased with himself for how he allowed himself to be used by these men. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him, or to deliver Daniel. He tried everything he could think of. Verse 15, Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king establishes may be changed. Then the king, in verse 16, commanded, because this was a law, then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. So even though, Daniel, I have to obey this law myself as king, and you're brought into the den of lions, he wanted to comfort Daniel by saying, but the God whom you serve will deliver you. I can't deliver you, Daniel, but your God can. Verse 17, and a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, or at the opening of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signature, that he signed the document, and with the signature of his lords, that the purpose may not be changed concerning Daniel. So the decree had been made, they signed the documents, and that law could not be changed. But Darius is concerned about Daniel. So verse 18 says, then the king went into his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. He could not go to sleep because of his concern for Daniel. And so, since he could not sleep, verse 19, then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. Verse 20, and when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? This king is coming into a knowledge of who the living God is. And this is what our situations in life demand of us, that we may find ourselves in troublesome times and troublesome situations, but our conduct and our response to that situation will determine whether people see the glory of God in our conduct, or if we cave into the wiles and tricks of the devil. So Daniel had a testimony with Darius, and now this same king didn't know what God would do, but he believed, as much as he knew how, that God would deliver Daniel from the den of lions. And he was right, because verse 21 says, then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God, we need to own God as our God. My God had sent his angel and had shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him, before God, innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. We can count on God delivering us out of the tricks and wiles of the devil, because our trust is in him and we have an eternal relationship with him. As is said in 1 Corinthians 10:13, there hath no temptation taken us but that which is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow us to be tempted above that we're able, but will, with the temptation, also make a way of escape, that we may be able to bear it. So Daniel gives glory to God and say, he has sent his angel to deliver me, and he has shut the lion's mouth, and I have no hurt. Verse 23. Then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him. Why? Because he believed in his God. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions had the mastery of them, and break all their bones in pieces, or ever or before. They came at the bottom of the den. While they're falling down, the lions jump up and grab their families, their children, their wives, and they are killed. The plot they had set for Daniel became their own trap. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. He says, I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, the living God. For he is the living God, and steadfast, faithful forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion or his kingdom shall be even unto the end. So Darius is making a testimony of who the living God is, and he's letting the people under his rulership know that there's no God like the God that Daniel served, and that God is the living God. And then he tells of God's attributes in verse 27. God, he is God. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who had delivered Daniel from the power of the viciousness of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So this concludes the historical section of the book of Daniel. Next week we will begin the prophetic section of Daniel from chapter 7 to chapter 12. So this historical event took place, and there are people in the world of Christendom who say that these events never actually took place, that they are myths, but are legends. So we have to decide whether we're going to believe the God of Daniel, the living God, who is the true and living God, or are we going to believe the lies of Satan working in the hearts of men, women, like he did in the hearts of these presidents and these princes who tried to discredit the man of God. So thank you all for listening. Next week we'll begin in chapter 7. And I thank you all for being so supportive and encouraging, those of you who take the time to listen. So I'll see you all next week. My email address is bjt1125@yahoo.com. Send me your comments or questions, and we will talk about them and pray about them as we go through the rest of this book. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.